Can I pour you a glass of beer?
Nothing for me.
How about a glass of water? After watching Paul Thomas Anderson's 2017 masterpiece, Phantom Thread, for the first time, I couldn't tear my mind away from the image you just saw. A momentary incidental scene in which Reynolds Woodcock pulls into the driveway of his summer house with his most recent paramour, Alma Elson. The film is full of arresting visuals that burrow into your brain, but in this case, my mind was focused on the music. I heard, or I thought I heard, an extremely literal reference to Beethoven's Piano Sonata No. 14, Opus 27, No. 2. Don't be intimidated by all the catalog numbers. You know this sonata as Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata. But unless I was mistaken, you couldn't see the moon at all in that shot, and composer Jonny Greenwood didn't seem to follow up on the Beethoven/Moonlight metaphor. It was simply there, and then it vanished. Maybe I was reading too much into a coincidence? Well, but no. In Phantom Thread, each and every moment is interwoven. The very fabric of the movie reflects the elegance of its subject matter, in that each and every fiber, no matter how small, is of the utmost importance. Throughout the movie are phantasmagoric moments like this one, which all serve to reinforce the presence of a powerful ghostly entity which is felt but is seldom seen. Therefore, I don't think it's possible to read too deeply into every musical and directorial decision. This is when I have to warn the world that there's going to be spoilers. See, Phantom Thread is a movie about repressed emotions and toxic relationships. In particular, it's about Reynolds Woodcock's devotion to his dead mother, and the battle amongst the women surrounding him to fill the gaping hole left in his heart when she passed. Woodcock, an unsubtle name chosen by Daniel Day-Lewis to reflect the rigid and self-centered character of the man.
I cannot begin my day with a confrontation, please. I'm delivering the dress today, and I can't take up space with a confrontation. I simply don't have time for confrontations.
This movie is full of unsubtle names. Woodcock's older sister is named Cyril, a masculine given name derived from the Greek word for masterful or lordly. And that is very much her role. Professionally, she is Woodcock's house manager and premier. Personally, she casts a domineering shadow over Woodcock. That is, until he meets Alma, a name which means nourishing. Check out the painting Alma Parens by William Adolph Bouguereau and you'll get the idea. In a story simply laced with references to hunger, Alma will be the only person on the planet who can feed Woodcock's desire to fully submit, to loosen his vice-like control over everything in his life, to become a helpless child once again. Phantom Thread rewards multiple viewings. Reading between the lines, you will realize that Woodcock lost his father at a very young age and became devoted to dressmaking during an arduous period of months, hand sewing his mother's wedding dress for her second marriage. We can deduce that she must have died shortly thereafter because Reynolds can only remember her visage in that very wedding dress. Her youthful presence is always surrounding him, and it's no coincidence that he and we, the viewer, see her physical body only once, when he is deliriously ill from Alma's poisonous mushrooms. Woodcock asks his mother, "Are you here? Are you always here?" She is, and we, the viewer, feel her phantom presence constantly. Hearing a reference to Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata while we look at a brightly lit night sky might be the clearest example of this. The moon itself is glaringly absent, but its ghostly aura permeates the images and the music. In this regard, I think Jonny Greenwood's score for Phantom Thread is remarkable. His music perfectly encapsulates the movie's subtle themes. So in this video, I'm going to look at 4 compositions which illustrate 4 thematic elements in the movie. I'll be helped along the way by trumpeter and cinephile Adam O'Farrell, as well as pianist and professional videographer Luke Marantz. These gentlemen were key to my understanding of the movie and its music. I have a feeling this is going to be a long video, so buckle in, grab a snack, and get ready to dive in to the gorgeously psychotic world of Phantom Thread. Before we talk about Jonny Greenwood's fantastic original score, it's important that we discuss the historical influences and the source music used in conceptualizing the overall sound world of this movie. In all of Greenwood and Anderson's collaborations, it's difficult for the casual listener to distinguish between previously recorded music and Greenwood's score. This is a feature of their work that stems from a deeply collaborative relationship which begins in pre-production, with Greenwood recording iPhone demos and Anderson doing early edits using Greenwood's demos as placeholders. Greenwood says that during the composition process he asked himself, what would Woodcock listen to? And he thought that such a rigorous man would love the piano music of Glenn Gould. At the same time, Anderson wanted Greenwood to incorporate influences from mid-century jazz into the score, because the story takes place in 1950s London, and jazz would have been in the air. In fact, in its early stages, one of the most recognizable cues, House of Woodcock, was titled Bill Piano, in reference to jazz pianist Bill Evans. Greenwood said, "The Glenn Gould / jazz stuff led me to the piano as an instrument that could tie it all together. Then when we started looking at footage, it felt like using a big string orchestra was just unavoidable. I was wary because it's quite a cliche. It's a very common keyboard patch, piano with simultaneous string chords. But then there's probably a good reason for that cliche existing. Piano and strings do sound pretty great together in the real world. I just had to avoid computer demos and trust what was on paper until we recorded it." So the piano emerged as a key component in the music. Add to that the fact that Greenwood was recording these iPhone demos on upright pianos in his dressing rooms while on tour with his band Radiohead. Listening to those demos, you can hear that the final recordings remain true to the overall vibe of those very first sketches. About 5 minutes into the movie is a long sequence which features a Nelson Riddle arrangement of My Foolish Heart, featuring another great pianist, Oscar Peterson. Nelson Riddle is a phenomenally great arranger who I'm sure is going to have an episode of Score Study devoted to him sometime in the future. And his arrangement of this tune for piano and orchestra is just plain gorgeous. It elegantly serves multiple functions within the context of the movie, firmly establishing the time period while also adding an air of elegance and capriciousness to the bustle of Woodcock's home workshop. However, it also feels ominous to me. Ned Washington's lyrics, while never actually sung, are present under the surface as a warning. Beware, my foolish heart. How white the ever-constant moon. Take care, my foolish heart. There's a line between love and fascination that's hard to see on an evening such as this. Remember that reference to Moonlight Sonata? While the exterior of the movie might seem calm and bright, there is an internal darkness already brewing. In an interview with Variety, Anderson said that he was thinking of vampire stories, of, quote, the little girl being lured to the big house when Alma first comes to visit. The full moon, then, is the harbinger of evil monsters, venomous spirits, and you will soon see that Greenwood's music cleverly amplifies these ghostly apparitions. That's such a fucking good.
Yeah, it is, man.
Jonny Greenwood told Esquire magazine about his composition process that I usually start with instrumentation, so there's a set of limitations. So, after firmly establishing the piano as central to the score, he was then goaded by Anderson to ignore his usual instinct for subtlety in favor of quote-unquote big-ass strings. For the strings, Greenwood reached out to the London Contemporary Orchestra, who he had worked with for The Master, You Were Never Really Here, and A Moon-Shaped Pool. He looked for inspiration from Nelson Riddle's score for Stanley Kubrick's Lolita, as well as Ben Webster's album Music for Loving, featuring string arrangements by Ralph Burns and Billy Strayhorn. In addition, he thought of orchestral recordings of Baroque music which were popular in the 1950s, which were inauthentic in terms of performance practice, but lush and beautiful nonetheless. For a good example of that, check out Riccardo Muti's recording of Vivaldi's Magnificat in G minor. Here's the thing. Can it be a coincidence that a movie called Phantom Thread, about a dressmaker who sews his secrets into the canvas of his clothing, whose entire life is defined by stitching, and who is figuratively attached to his dead mother by the umbilical cord of his grief, has a soundtrack that features only string instruments: piano, harp, violin, viola, cello, and bass. That's it. The piano is a percussion instrument technically, but its hammers descend on strings. If you're skeptical, just look at the title card of a thread woven into an infinity symbol, okay? Don't you think Anderson and Greenwood would have been aware that the sound of vibrating strings would call to mind a visual of cross-stitched threads woven into a blanket of eternal sound? Okay, maybe that's a little dramatic, but Greenwood exploits the strings for all they are worth. Taking the Phantom Thread theme as an example, we have a version for just a solo violin, and a version for a 60-piece string orchestra. In between those extremes, we have a version which utilizes canon at the unison to evoke phantoms ceaselessly haunting woodcock. To me, those canonic lines sound like a delay effect with the feedback turned all the way to 100. As if they are the leftover aura of the preceding melody. Later in the movie, while Alma is preparing Woodcock's mushroom omelet, we hear the theme again, this time for full orchestra. And you can really hear what Greenwood meant when he said he wanted the music to sound like a giant but inauthentic Baroque orchestral recording. The Phantom Thread theme is the solitary recurring motif in the whole movie, and whenever it occurs, it seems to relate to Woodcock's mother. We've already seen the ghostly version, and we've seen the giant orchestral version. It's strange because as ominous as that music seems, we hear it while Alma is performing the motherly task of making breakfast for Woodcock. For me, what really solidifies the mother connection with this music is the first scene in which Woodcock absconds control to Alma. Sitting in his car, she brushes his hair behind his ear and says, "Let me drive." We then hear the phantom thread theme, except played by a cymbalum, a different kind of string sound which is supposed to evoke some sort of vague eastern country that Alma might hail from. Woodcock has spent his life in fascistic control of everything around him, as if his mother's death gave him a permanent distaste for powerlessness. But Alma is willing to do everything she can to help him release his dominant grip. And Greenwood was able to convey all of that with just a simple Nino Rota-esque theme, and with marvelous orchestration decisions. That's the brilliance of this score. Each cue evokes one of the major themes of the movie: hunger, thread, phantoms, and yes, moonlight. For the composition titled Endless Superstition, Jonny Greenwood morphed the first 3 notes of the Phantom Thread theme into a lilting 12/8 arpeggio in G-flat major. After 2 measures of clearly establishing the key of G-flat major, the melody then begins on beat 4 with a dotted 8th note followed by a 16th note. Give it a listen. This juxtaposition of triple and duple meter cannot be heard as anything other than a reference to Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata. Let me just play that for you as a point of reference. Greenwood's deliberate choice to make this reference is brilliant on 2 levels. The first was mentioned earlier. When we hear this music, we're looking at the image of a brightly lit night sky. But secondly, and perhaps more importantly, it establishes the simple duple to triple polyrhythm that permeates the soundtrack. Not only are examples of this polyrhythm found in almost all of Greenwood's original music, they are also present in much of the commercially recorded music that Anderson chose for the film. For example, roughly a quarter of the way into the film, as we observe Woodcock and Alma's bumpy introduction to cohabitation, we hear the music of Debussy's string quartet in G minor, in which duple against triple polyrhythms abound. Later, as Alma poses for a photo shoot in a dress that isn't fitting quite right, we hear Schubert's Piano Trio No. 2, Opus 100. Again, polyrhythms. You see, the dress isn't the only thing that isn't fitting quite right. The presence of Alma in Woodcock's house has thrown off the natural equilibrium of his codependent relationship with his sister Cyril. And to my ears, the constant polyrhythms in Greenwood's music evoke that unsettled feeling. The many instances throughout the film of the Barbara Rose music for string quartet, Greenwood's channeling of Bartók's epochal string quartets, are a perfect example of this phenomenon.
Don't do that. Take your hand away,
still
please.
So ugly.
Barbara, I'm trying to make you a beautiful dress.
Similarly, the music from my favorite cue, the hem, slips elastically in and out of polyrhythmic chaos. However, it isn't just rhythmic dissonance that creates tension in the hem. The harmony is slippery. It seems to be in a constant state of modulation, always a work in progress, never at home in any key. So, to fully understand Greenwood's harmonic concept, we're going to need to look at the work of his biggest hero, Olivier Messiaen. It's no secret that Jonny Greenwood loves Olivier Messiaen. Messiaen was my first connection to classical music. He was still alive when I was 15, and for whatever reason, I felt I could equate him with my other favorite bands. There was no big posthumous reputation to put me off, so I'm still very fond of writing things in the same modes of limited transposition that he used. When I transcribed the hymn, I was immediately and clearly struck by its resemblance to the fifth movement of Messiaen's Quartet for the End of Time. I'm particularly familiar with this piece because years ago, I got the opportunity to attend a series of masterclasses taught by the incredible composer and pianist Guillermo Klein, and he spoke at length about this piece. At letter D in Messiaen's piece, there is a recapitulation which consists of the following chord progression: E6 over B, B flat major, sharp 11 over D, G major, sharp 11 over D. These gorgeous chords and the accompanying melody are derived from one of those modes of limited transposition that Jonny Greenwood was referring to. Specifically, they account for all the pitches in the second mode, also known as the octatonic scale. Compositions using this octatonic scale are usually full of the tension associated with diminished chords. But Messiaen patiently shows us that one can derive gorgeous sonorities. Major 6 chords, sharp 11s, dominant 7ths, and all of their inversions are gorgeously combined with third relations. This creates a kind of harmony that is both languid and static, but also ever-changing, like the calm waters of a river. So Greenwood has latched onto these messianic harmonies in the hymn, a piece which encapsulates all the major motives of the phantom thread music. Rigorous pianism, gorgeous strings, never-ending polyrhythms. The hymn is built from a series of chord changes which begin at measure 3. C minor, F sharp 7, A major 6 over E, E flat minor, A7, C6, E flat major sharp 11 over G, C7 over G, F sharp 7, back to C minor. Sound familiar? All of these chords are derived from Messiaen's second mode of limited transposition. Saying a mode is of limited transposition refers to the fact that, unlike major and minor scales, we cannot transpose these scales into 12 different iterations because they are symmetrical scales. The octatonic scale can be transposed up a half step or up a whole step, but if you transpose it up a minor third, you're confronted with exactly the same pitches of your first octatonic scale. So, there are only 3 distinct transpositions of the octatonic scale. Greenwood began with this series of 8 pitches: C, C sharp, D sharp, E, F sharp, G, A, B flat, and C. Now watch and listen. Every single chord in the hymn is built from these pitches. Notice also how the regular triple pulse of the hymn is constantly being interrupted by measures containing 3 eighth notes. 3/8 is a time signature which cannot be divided evenly into triplets. These abrupt interruptions, along with the constantly modulating harmony, further reinforces the feeling that Alma just does not fit in the house of Woodcock. If she is going to break through to Woodcock, she must become indispensable to him, and for that, she will have to take desperate measures.
Kiss me, my girl, before I'm sick.
I've got to be honest, I didn't love Phantom Thread after my first viewing. I mean, I thought it was great work as per usual for artists like Anderson, Day-Lewis, and Greenwood, but it left me feeling uneasy, uncertain, like I was missing something. After many rewatchings, I had a breakthrough. This is exactly how Anderson wants you to feel. Woodcock, too, is missing something. He is hungry, famished even, for something to replace the constant presence of his mother's phantom. Alma turns out to be exactly the woman for the job because she is willing, as she states in the beginning of the film, to give him everything he desires most. Except what he desires most is to be incapacitated. He would probably be diagnosed with Munchausen's syndrome. He wants the full attention of a mother figure so badly, he's willing to make himself sick. Is this love? Good old WebMD tells us that the early loss of a parent may be a factor in the development of Munchausen's syndrome. Early trauma causes an inability to deal with stress and anxiety in a healthy way. Where have I heard that before? All of this is to say that now, having watched Phantom Thread 6 or 7 times, I still have that uneasy feeling. I mean, in one sense, this is a love story, because had Woodcock never met Alma, he would never have known the unadulterated happiness of puking his guts out while lying in a pool of his own sweat. And had Alma never met Woodcock, she would have never discovered the pleasure of bringing someone you love to their knees, I guess. On the other hand, this story is about the things left unsaid in the script. So if you're like me, you're left wondering, what happened in Woodcock's childhood? Was he abused? What exactly was his father like? How did he die? When and how exactly did his mother die? Did he like this new stepfather that he was making a dress for the wedding of? Wait, was the mother buried in her wedding dress? And that's why the ghost version of her is in it? So that's why I feel that the main character of Phantom Thread is a phantom. Woodcock's mother permeates every single aspect of Woodcock's life, and she needs to be exorcised. Or at least that's how I feel right now. Actually, come to think of it, I'm gonna go rewatch Phantom Thread. Thanks everybody for watching. Thank you, Adam O'Farrell. Thank you, Luke Morantz. If you want to hear more of the music that we made together, you can get all of it on my Patreon page. Please consider supporting the channel by joining my Patreon or just by liking, subscribing, and telling your friends. See you soon.